Welcome back. South African authorities said they are investigating how electronic equipment made in the country ended up in Russian drones used to attack Ukraine. The part in question is a laser rangefinder made by Lightware Optoelectronics based on the outskirts of Pretoria. It can be used to measure distances and trigger detonation. Joining us for a discussion is military specialist Ricardo Teixeira. Ricardo, very good evening to you. And I guess the billion-dollar question, how did it end up being that a South African-based company is able to supply technology that ends up in the Russian Defense Force?
Well, thank you very much for having me. But one thing we need to remember is that Russia has become very adept at skirting sanctions. They famously have a shadow fleet that's helping them skirt sanctions around their oil. And it wasn't just South African parts that were found in this drone, the Garpia A1. It was also parts from a Swiss company. Switzerland is also famously very, very strict on their exports for any sort of defense products. But this points to a larger issue in that a lot of the components that are used in commercial drones are also used in military drones. And it's starting to become a point where the line is blurred, where the only real difference between a commercial drone and a military drone is their application. Furthermore, another alarming thing that not many people realize is that the drones themselves that Russia was using, which are based on the Iranian Shahed 136, were originally a South African product known as the ARD-10 Lark from Kentron, which is now Denel Dynamics, and the intellectual property for that product was sold to Iran in the early 2000s. So I think that South Africans need to have a deep look in the mirror and try and determine, what are we doing with our defense export products? Because this is, again, this is just a laser rangefinder, but the application of these products and the progression in drone technology has far outpaced any legislation or control around their use.
And as the matter becomes a little bit more murky as well, what can government do to ensure that, or also these companies as well, to ensure that they know where their tools and their products actually end up?
There definitely needs to be some stronger compliance and oversight on end-user certificates for anything that could be used in a drone. But this is a global issue. And the UN itself does not have a single treaty that deals with drones. It is in the process of drafting up some treaties and laws around the use of drones and autonomous systems. But again, I want to stress that the difference between a commercial drone and a military drone lies in their application. And we can see this in Ukraine as well with a drone the Ukrainians use, which is known as Baba Yaga, which is a low-flying drone that carries 81 and 120 millimeter mortar rounds. But it's actually just a slightly modified agricultural drone that is normally used to scatter seeds. Drone warfare has progressed rapidly, and I think that a lot of the controls and the legislation around the use of drones doesn't exist yet. And I think South Africa, this is a great opportunity for South Africa as the president of the G20 to start advancing some of the legislation and controls around this. I don't think it's the fault of the company. I think this is something that's very difficult to control, and Russia has become very adept at trying to skirt around sanctions in order to get these components.
Yeah, because the company in question says there's no need to seek export permits when it comes to this, because they weren't manufacturing those particular tools for, they were using it for commercial drone use and not for it to be used in a war.
Yes, and that again is because there is no legislation currently mandating that. But again, as I've said, because of how fast drone technology has moved, perhaps there needs to be end-user certificates and export permits for anything that can potentially be used in a military drone. If it can be used in a commercial drone and that technology may have military applications, perhaps there needs to be some sort of stricter oversight. The reality is that the legislation hasn't caught up with the law.
And speaking about stricter oversight as well, Ricardo, the company in question saying that they did not need to seek those export permits. When it comes to the National Conventional Arms Control Committee, they're saying that, look, there needs to be an investigation. They will actually be visiting the premises of this company as well to find out how it found itself in this particular situation. What can then the NCACC do to this company when it's saying that it didn't actually produce these tools for war use?
Well, this company isn't required to be compliant with the NCACC. So I don't think the NCACC could do much in this instance because, again, there's no legal authority for them to have to report it. But the company itself did note that they actively do not sell to any countries that are involved in a conflict. But again, Russia's had a very, very broad network used to skirt sanctions and to find these components. I mean, there have even been some components from American companies, such as Texas Instruments, that have found their way into Russian optics in their tanks. Russia is very, very good at trying to find technology and hiding the end destinations. But the NCACC should do an investigation. And again, there needs to be a lot stricter legislation. But I want to stress again that this is not just South Africa's problem. This is a global issue. This is something that a lot of countries need to get together at the UN, perhaps, and try and come up with some legislation around this, because there's, again, the war has progressed the technology a lot faster than legislation and any sorts of controls or any framework for monitoring this has been able to be developed.
Speaking to News 24, the CEO of the company said that they have end user declarations to control where and to whom their products are being sold. Is it fair to then say that these end user declarations aren't effective?
Yes, that is fair to say. I mean, the end user can always lie. And as the company has implied, and what is likely the case, that end user probably went on to resell it towards a Russian company, or perhaps onto another company who went on to do it. We have no proof of what that company ended up doing with it. All we know is the part went to them, and thereafter, somehow it ended up in a Russian drone. So this has clearly not been effective.
Ricardo, really appreciate your insights as always. Thank you so much for joining us on Newzroom Afrika.